Chapter 4, Ethical Leadership and Decision-Making. According to Walker, 2011, the well-being of organizations, their members, and society are affected by the ethical decisions made by those charged with leading and guiding these organizations, p. 1. Walker's proposition confirms the importance of understanding ethical decision-making and developing management strategies and policies to promote ethically sound decision-making processes in organizations. Walker noted that the public might be cynical about power-driven politicians, rigid and rule-bound government bureaucrats, and greedy executives. Moreover, the demands and expectations for ethically responsible decision-making appear to be growing, as the public increasingly perceives its well-being threatened by the practices and policies of various public and private organizations. The situations with Enron and organizations affected by financial scandals were a threat to fiscal well-being and the growing social movement to protect the environment. Snellman, 2015, equally disclosed that the last decade's serious organizational scandals that mainly stem from corruption and conflicting interests, but also from bribery, favoritism, and other wrongdoings, have accentuated the need for finding instruments for achieving more ethical organizational leadership. Consequently, it is paramount to state that as business organizations function with the approbation of society, Donaldson and Dunphy, 1994, they need to adapt to the changing societal conditions. For instance, by adopting a new conception of market success, where traditional financial bottom-line indicators are being complemented with social and environmental factors. Hilliard, 2013. Walker, 2011, further noted the importance of understanding ethical decision-making behavior and the development of management strategies and policies to promote ethically sound decisions in organizations. Walker's findings also supported the theory that increased levels of personalized information result in an ethical sensitivity in decision-making situations. The findings indicated there could be a large impact on ethical decision-making if education and training involved matters concerning ethical sensitivity. Walker, 2011. Developments regarding the Code of Ethics, Governance, and Managing Others have shown increased popularity. Carter-Thompson, 2003. For example, the American College of Healthcare Executives, recognized as the American College of Hospital Administrators prior to 1985, established a code of ethics that governed hospital administrators in 1939, Rubens and Wimberly, 2004. In contrast, the establishment of codes of ethics used to guide physicians, lawyers, dentists, and nurses' behaviors and decisions occurred long ago. Dar, 1997. Glover et al., 1991, indicated that no researcher had examined administrators' ethical decision-making in business operations other than care of patients' popular relation to a professional code of ethics. Cooks and Host, 2013, asked, if standards have not been set, can obligations for truth-telling and informed consent be honored? p. 243, which indicated the use of unethical clinical care. An understanding of the phenomenon could help healthcare administrators and policymakers suggest criteria to follow in the ethical decision-making process. Any suggested model may serve to enrich the quality of life of people in the society. Principles of ethical leadership. Ethical leadership practice calls for ethically sound and morally desirable decision-making processes with the aim of achieving moral excellence. Losh and Conaway, 2015. To this end, the Josephson Institute of Ethics has identified 12 cardinal principles of ethical leadership for organizational executives. These principles provide a workable template for organizational leaders in general, and they include: 1. Honesty. Ethical executives are honest and truthful in all their dealings, and they do not deliberately mislead or deceive others by misrepresentations, overstatements, partial truths, selective omissions, or any other means. 2. Integrity. Ethical executives demonstrate personal integrity and the courage of their convictions by doing what they think is right, even when there is great pressure to do otherwise. They are principled, honorable, and upright. They will fight for their beliefs. They will not sacrifice principle for expediency, be hypocritical, or unscrupulous. 3. Promise-keeping and trustworthiness. Ethical executives are worthy of trust. They are candid and forthcoming in supplying relevant information and correcting misapprehensions of fact, and they make every reasonable effort to fulfill the letter and spirit of their promises and commitments. They do not interpret agreements in an unreasonably technical or legalistic manner in order to rationalize non-compliance or create justifications for escaping their commitments. 4. Loyalty. Ethical executives are worthy of trust, demonstrate fidelity and loyalty to persons and institutions by friendship in adversity, support, and devotion to duty. They do not use or disclose information learned in confidence for personal advantage. They safeguard the ability to make independent professional judgments by scrupulously avoiding undue influences and conflicts of interest. They are loyal to their companies and colleagues, and if they decide to accept other employment, they provide reasonable notice, respect the proprietary information of their former employer, and refuse to engage in any activities that take undue advantage of their previous positions. 5. Fairness. Ethical executives are fair and just in all dealings. They do not exercise power arbitrarily and do not use overreaching nor indecent means to gain or maintain any advantage, nor take undue advantage of another's mistakes or difficulties. Fair persons manifest a commitment to justice, the equal treatment of individuals, tolerance for and acceptance of diversity. They are open-minded. They are willing to admit they are wrong and, where appropriate, change their positions and beliefs. 6. Concern for others. Ethical executives are caring, compassionate, benevolent, and kind. They like the golden rule, help those in need, and seek to accomplish their business objectives in a manner that causes the least harm and the greatest positive good. 7. Respect for others. Ethical executives demonstrate respect for the human dignity, autonomy, privacy, rights, and interests of all those who have a stake in their decisions. They are courteous and treat all people with equal respect and dignity, regardless of sex, race, or national origin. 8. Law-abiding. Ethical executives abide by laws, rules, and regulations relating to their business activities. 9. Commitment to excellence. Ethical executives pursue excellence in performing their duties, are well-informed and prepared, and constantly endeavor to increase their proficiency in all areas of responsibility. 10. Leadership. Ethical executives are conscious of the responsibilities and opportunities of their position of leadership and seek to be positive ethical role models by their own conduct and by helping to create an environment in which principled reasoning and ethical decision-making are highly prized. 11. Reputation and morale. Ethical executives seek to protect and build the company's good reputation and the morale of its employees by engaging in no conduct that might undermine respect and by taking whatever actions are necessary to correct or prevent inappropriate conduct of others. 12. Accountability. Ethical executives acknowledge and accept personal accountability for the ethical quality of their decisions and omissions to themselves, their colleagues, their companies, and their communities. Ethics in healthcare leadership. Ethical decision-making has always been an integral part of the daily practice of healthcare providers. However, the nature has changed considerably for a variety of reasons, including political and social changes, major advances in medical and scientific knowledge, and advances in the technology of life-sustaining procedures. According to Grunfeld, 2000, the complex situations generated by technology and the rapidly changing healthcare environment have intensified the need to understand the role of ethics in the decision-making process of healthcare administrators. The paucity of ethics, commercialization, and fierce competition yield profitable dividends at the expense of patients' trust, as well as on questions of prolonging life, ending life, propagating life, re-engineering life, immunization, chlorination, and fluoridation tests. The role of ethics is important in environments such as healthcare organizations, and healthcare administrators' decision-making is paramount to the progress and growth of the leadership in healthcare organizations and to patients' immediate benefits. Williamson and Jaunch, 1995. Since an organization's well-being depends on the members of the team and leaders' ethical decision-making process, choices made by healthcare administrators play a vital role in organizational achievements. According to Dar, 1997, the manager is the organization's conscience, Pew, and health administrators have to recognize individual values to assist with difficult decisions they need to make for their organizations, P2. Healthcare leaders have a strong understanding of the role of ethics in the provision of care, RORAF 2010, Wall 2007, but rarely concerning the effect of ethics in healthcare business decisions, RORAF 2010, Wall 2007. Research findings have, however, shown that a shared belief and vision, joined with imagination, strategic planning, and application and implementation, can help to effectively mobilize resources to establish priority measures and accomplish quality patient safety outcomes in organizations. Shifting the paradigm from just meeting the standards to continual readiness and performance improvement throughout the organization becomes mission and mantra. Gantz, Sorensen, and Howard, 2003. Many healthcare executives face ethical conflicts regularly. Healthcare executives make many decisions surrounding the strategic direction of policies, allocation of resources, and policy interpretation. Williamson and Jock, 1995. Corporate healthcare finance and organizational challenges are important in an era of increased doubt and skepticism about healthcare leaders making tough decisions, displaying values, and increased interest in the health system where they work. Rubens and Wimberly, 2004. Understanding ethics assists in decreasing unethical decisions made by healthcare administrators and in laying a foundation for ensuring all considerations taken into account are relevant when resolving and preventing ethical dilemmas. An organization's well-being depends on healthcare administrators' ethical decision-making process. The ethical choices made during such decision-making affect the success of an organization and the well-being of society. Whitmer, 1995. Understanding the ethical decision-making of healthcare administrators is necessary to develop executive strategies and policies. Additionally, ethics might be important to curbing the cost of healthcare, which required expert leaders with ethics knowledge and practices to use tools such as normative frameworks to reduce costs through waste analysis and reconcile both business practices and clinical operations. Medical executives often develop a code of ethics to ensure an equitable resolution of issues affecting the public, Dar, 1997, and such code of ethics in public health is necessary to address any public fairness tasks, Cass, 2001. Medicine has a framework that guides practitioners in their clinical settings, but there is no such framework for healthcare leaders, Cass, 2001. Other touchstones are democratic institutions and humanistic values, notions of good management, professional standards, or even religious values. Walker, 2011. Healthcare organizations require daily ethical decision-making in organization services, employee behavior, clinical practices, and allocation of resources to create an effect on quality of care. Nelson, 2005. In line with Harvey, 1997, ethical conflicts occur regularly in organizations, so it is imperative to pay attention to decisions made and to actions made in response to ethical questions that may directly affect the quality of care for a patient. Harvey also noted it is important for researchers to reflect upon the preconceptions, biases, past experiences, and perhaps even hypotheses that make the project significant for the investigator and that may affect how the interpretation takes shape. Benner, 1994 p. 72, as cited by Harvey, 1997. Ethics awareness is prevalent in the healthcare industry. Therefore, healthcare executives must be more effective than those in other industries in balancing ethics in business and in clinical settings. Williamson and Jock, 1995. Healthcare executives manage larger decisions surrounding direction and strategy, as well as the allocation of resources and determinations for major policies. Williamson and Jock, 1995. Newly hired healthcare administrators may require establishing a strategy from various associations to assist them with ethical decisions and to provide the direction required for conducting the appropriate ethical behavior in an organization. Rubens and Wimberly, 2004. Managers and clinicians have recently the need for a consistent process informed by ethics input when making decisions in their facility. Foglia et al., 2009. With regard to consistency, the application of a symphonological framework solves the ethical problem. Such a decision-making process was not clearly noted in a manner easy to follow to make a consistent decision-making framework accepted as a fair process that yields an equitable result. The result, which leaders assumed to be a fair process, was also a barrier to developing a standardized process within the healthcare organization. Though managers accept and understand the fair process that is procedural justice, it still depends on a set of procedures or guidelines to guarantee fair relationships among stakeholders. Ethical theories in decision-making. Berry 2007 indicated that moral and ethical implications were present in every stage of decision-making. Thus, ethical theories used in decision-making include utilitarian, deontological, and virtue, as well as Kohlberg's theory of moral reasoning, which provides a structure for choosing, mitigating, and standing in on decisions by developing a guiding principle for behavior, using Otts, Brody, 1988. Ethics theory includes 4 basic assumptions. A. Moral judgments are universally applicable. B. Moral judgment outweighs other considerations. C. Ethics are prescriptive. And D. Ethics theory assumes autonomy. Roraff, 2010. Rest, 1976. Proposed. Moral judgment is a psychological raise purporting to represent diverse organizations of thoughts, p. 213, that allows individuals to differ in the theories they use from person to person. He further proposed that individuals do not differ in the theory they practice. Under the utilitarianism in decision-making, the most important aspect is determining the best solution with the least pain to the employee, the organization, or the community. Morell, 2004. Utilitarianism appeals to business people because of a dependence on harmonizing costs and profit. Roraff, 2010. Utilitarianism is a means of weighing the cost and profit of decisions and acting on the decision that gives the best gain. Hartman, 2004, Roraff, 2010. Malhotra and Miller, 1998, noted in the practice of utilitarianism, individuals must remember that the decisions that impose the greatest amount of excellence for all parties are the correct decisions, and may result in some individuals wronged for the greater good. Roraff, 2010. Using the utilitarian theory in decision-making allows the largest group to benefit and overlooks the harm that may occur while achieving the ends. Koch, 2001. Kant proposed lying was wrong, even if telling the truth meant loss of life. Calhoun, 2004, Roraff, 2010. Kohlberg, 1976, proposed that moral development progress increased more effective ways of using moral reasoning to resolve moral problems. According to Van Sant, 2003, moral awareness is the point that an individual accepts the potential of immorality or harm to others. Kohlberg described the stages of moral development that individuals attain and noted those stages influence decision-making as cited in Roraff, 2010. MacDonald and Pack described Kohlberg's 6 levels of moral development. A. The pre-convention level of punishment and reward. B. The conventional level of societal norms. C. The post-conventional level of approval of others. D. The conscience maintenance level of rules and laws. E. The social contract level of changing laws. And F. The universal level of justice. Roraff, 2010. At the pre-convention level, individuals make ethical decisions based on self and the avoidance of reprimand or punishment from a higher authority. Ponemon and Gabart, 1994. According to Henry, as cited in Roraff 2010, Kohlberg's lack of civilization and situational context was a challenge to the theory. Kohlberg, 1971, proposed moral development was a philosophical concept and not a behavioral concept, and noted the essence of morality was respect for the norm of the group, and differences in the content of the norms were irrelevant. According to MacDonald and Pack, 1996, as cited in Roraff 2010, Gilligan accused Kohlberg's theory of being gender-biased, as Kohlberg only studied males. Gilligan, 1993, indicated that men were justice-oriented to moral behavior, whereas women considered behavior moral based on a concept of caring. Mysewski and Troy, 2007, proposed deontological theory as moral law and duty needed in the business climate, but Mathewson, 2007, noted conflicts might occur when ranking duties against each other. Deontological ethicists described ought as a universal or situational duty or right that individuals have toward each other. Wallach et al., 2008. This principle indicates that it is morally wrong to use others as objects to manipulate for personal gain. Harvey, 1997. Deontology serves as a protector of individual rights, and as such holds ethics as a universal obligation that binds everybody to maintain reason above feeling and principles above consequences regarding morality as a duty or rule of right and wrong. Isaac, 2010. Kant noted that moral agents can take actions to be right only if they see such actions as universally binding. Freed, 1978, Harvey, 1997, Sherwin, 1992. Moral agents are individuals skilled enough to both formulate and pursue their own purpose, and who are responsible for the actions taken that may have fulfilled those purposes. Individuals must remove moral agents from other items, such as daggers or shovels, which exist solely to fulfill purposes imposed by the moral agents. Kantian ethics prohibits the consideration of the particular circumstances of an action, including the feelings of the agent or others affected by the action. Harvey, 1997. Deontologists attach moral significance to certain relationships. Isaac, 2010. One example includes nurses who take care of patients irrespective of the abuse given to the nurses. Deontologists refer to this type of obligation as a true duty to a profession. Healthcare leaders ought to reconsider current trends and save the world or society. Rising healthcare costs have resulted in families cutting back on care and facing serious financial problems. KFF, 2012. Hyde, 2012, noted the need for managers to access certain ethical guidelines such as the Maryland Association of Nonprofit Organizations, Pennsylvania Association of Nonprofit Organizations, Utah Nonprofits Association, and the independent sector. The emphasis of these organizations was on legal compliance, fiscal obligations, public disclosure, and conflicts of interest in responsible fundraising. White, 2010, and their standards do not specifically address the unique challenges of human service in organizations. According to Hyde, 2012, public sector managers, the American Public Human Services Association, and its affiliates, including the National Association of Public Child Welfare Administrators, National Staff Development and Training Association, National Association of State TANF Administrators, and IT Solutions Management for Human Services, offered education and training in ethical issues of concern to human service leaders, p. 353. The objective is to maintain ethical cultural standards based on context to help in decision-making within organizations. Chapter 5, Ethical Dilemmas in Healthcare Leadership. Ethical dilemmas are feelings of doubt where an individual is not sure which action to take amid many similar options. Wienand et al., 2007, see ethical dilemma as a situation which involves balancing between several decisions concerning the following organizational climate components: performance assessment and reward systems, leadership style in the unit, job satisfaction, organizational communication, perceived quality of care, team spirit, as well as training and development. Ethical dilemmas occur when staff members are unable to act in accordance with their professional ethical viewpoint and to deliver an appropriate standard of care. Attributing personal values reflects the amount of value accredited to a dilemma, such as keeping a promise to an agreement, that is, symphonology, Latin symphonia, by doing no harm, and maintaining professional integrity. Such dilemmas often cause healthcare leaders to experience significant moral distress in dealing with organizational leadership. LaSala, 2010. For example, nurses can experience moral distress when financial constraints or inadequate staffing compromises their ability to provide quality patient care. LaSala, 2010. It is noteworthy that ethical dilemmas are not new to professional practice, but in recent years, the problems faced by healthcare leaders have become increasingly complex due to high costs of service, inappropriate resource allocation, and inequality of care for patients. Isaac, 2010. The cost of healthcare, especially Medicare, has led to increased awareness of the need to reevaluate ethical principles and to seek a conceptual framework in the decision-making of health administrators to reconcile business operations and clinical practices. Healthcare professionals face ethical dilemmas in all facets of the healthcare arena, from administration to the bedside. Thus, ethical dilemmas continue to be a problem in healthcare administrators' decision-making process. Ovid's acceptance of abortion and Socrates' willingness to accept execution rather than keep his moral agreements are examples of ethical dilemmas. Ethical Dilemmas of Healthcare Leaders. Button, 2017, has opined that healthcare leadership ethics is an important but often overlooked subject. Unethical conduct on the part of healthcare leaders can result in legal and reputation costs to the organization where they work, meaning that ethical behavior is ultimately in the organization's best interests. Today's leaders in healthcare are being challenged by many demands and issues. To confront these many demands, healthcare leaders must have the ability to make decisions based on ethics. Scholastica et al., 2010. Healthcare leaders' role in healthcare organizations is vital to the management of resources as well as the care of patients. Healthcare managers can help support staff to act in ways that are consistent with ethical norms and standards by fully appreciating the ethical challenges encountered in the workplace. Healthcare in the 21st century is governed by a complex array of issues, rules, regulations, laws, and ethical standards, causing ethical dilemmas for healthcare leaders. Such areas of ethical dilemmas, according to Ohio University 2021, include 1. Balancing fiscal responsibility and ethics. Healthcare leaders often are responsible for making financial decisions that can impact both their healthcare organization and the quality of care delivered. It can be very challenging to balance competing demands, and it sometimes pits budget, quality, and ethics against each other. For example, leaders often must choose between hiring more staff to decrease nurse-to-patient ratios and buying or repairing equipment. Number 2, mitigating legal risks ethically. Malpractice and lawsuits can be devastating to any healthcare practice. A healthcare leader may be asked to work with staff to resolve complaints before the issues escalate to the point of legal, and to help ensure ethical leadership in healthcare E and other industry ES, that the organization's providers are basing their decisions on patients' needs over other factors. Appropriate actions may include disciplining or terminating a member of a healthcare team. Writing for the National Institutes of Health, M. Sonal Sekar and N. Vyas explain that fear of legal action may also cause providers to engage in defensive medicine, which implies departing from normal medical practice as a safeguard from litigation. It occurs when a medical practitioner performs treatment or a procedure to avoid exposure to malpractice litigation. Balancing legal issues requires careful ethical analysis of all the issues. 3. Ethics of privacy. An important ethical principle is maintaining the right to privacy and autonomy. Healthcare organizations are increasingly reliant on technology, such as electronic health records, EHRs, for recording, storing, and transmitting sensitive health information. Leaders may play a role in ensuring that these systems adhere to all the relevant laws and regulations, such as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. However, as Philip Meredith explains in the journal Psychiatry, there are circumstances under which confidentiality must be broken. For example, to prevent harm to a patient or outside party. A thorough understanding of these rules and ability to analyze the ethical principles involved is important for professional leadership. 4. The ethics of managing influential relationships. Healthcare leaders may work to manage relationships with many stakeholders, including external vendors who provide products and services, including brand-name medications, diagnostic equipment, and software solutions. This attention is necessary to ensure that staff members are making decisions in the patient's best interests without outside influence. Stakeholders are those affected by institutional decisions to derive benefits from the organization. Stakeholders also give positive ratings of supervisors and managers, less theft and other forms of retaliatory behaviors toward the organizations. Managers in Foglia et al.'s 2009 study identified a number of factors they believed could contribute to a fair allocation process, such as having explicit criteria involving stakeholders and those involving ethics expertise, though aspiration and not consistently included in current decision-making process. Organizational leaders establish protocols, routines, tasks, and documentation of work to curb disputes. Hence, ethical practices become the norm and decrease the friction created by everyday disputes among stakeholders. In such instances, the quality of both the organization and individual performance rests on repetitive practices. Bosk, 2010. In some instances, Bosk regard bioethics as a social phenomenon or movement known to promote conservative, faith-based values in healthcare decision-making rather than secular and pluralistic values. Bosk, 2010. Clinicians often complain about a lack of communication between themselves and the leaders in resource allocation, which indicates that leaders take decisions leaving the necessary aspect of the system, such as collaboration with clinicians, to improve the system through proper allocation of resources. Ethics Committee person also identified ongoing problem by identifying decision-makers' tools. The effect of the organization or the culture of the organization process determines how individuals act, and such an effect creates a gap between how staff ought to act and how staff act. Healthcare leaders must sort out this premise within the organization's systems and processes, and not among the individuals who work within the system. Managers complained of the unavailability of a clear and consistent process to adjudicate between conflicting priorities. Some managers complained of being in an objectionable position to make decisions that would affect patients without any normative framework to guide stakeholders, but were not consistent, rather aspirational in current decision-making process. Fogli et al., 2009. Limitations of legal and moral considerations. Now, the most important question is, how can healthcare leaders effectively take ethical decisions under the above considerations? Incidentally, although the importance of ethical conduct has gained wide acknowledgement in the human services, managers' identification and resolution of ethical issues still receive little attention. As we will see in the next 2 chapters, however, the specific problem is a lack of symphonology, which is a concept needed to ease the decision-making process of healthcare leaders in reconciling business and clinical practices. In the meantime, it must be noted that healthcare leaders have often applied the same strategic approach to ethical dilemmas as philosophers have by using moral reasoning. Littleton, 2010. Moral reasoning postulates that the fact that an action is legally permissible does not mean it is morally and ethically allowable. Lachman, 2007. Indeed, healthcare leaders need a decision-making process to address these dilemmas in a logical, acceptable, and ethical context. Providers analyze the situation of alternatives to justify moral reasoning principles in accordance with organizational and personal ethics, and with final decisions reached. Darn 7. Healthcare leaders would hold on to the ethical principles of healthcare organizations. The consequences may be significant if healthcare administrators ignore such obligations, and unethical behavior is a risk for healthcare leaders. Estimated costs for U.S. taxpayers for fraud and abuse in healthcare are over $11.9 billion a year, with a majority of the abuse attributed to acute care settings. Roraff, 2010. Outcomes resulting from unethical behavior make clear the necessity for all healthcare leaders to improve the function of ethical decision-making. Pelletier and Bly, 2006. According to Berry, 2007, moral and ethical implications are present in every stage of decision-making. Healthcare leaders have a strong understanding of the role of ethics in the provision of care. Roraff, 2010, Wall, 2007. But rarely concerning the effect of ethics in healthcare business decisions. Roraff, 2010, Wall, 2007. Healthcare leaders need to apply the collaborative perspectives offered in this study to the fact that a shared belief and vision, joined with imagination, strategic planning, and application and implementation, can effectively mobilize resources to establish priority measures and accomplish quality patient safety outcomes in organizations. Shifting the paradigm from just meeting the standards to continual readiness and performance improvement throughout the organization becomes mission and mantra. Gantz, Sorensen, and Howard, 2003. Moral decision-making derives benefit from beliefs, values, settings, professional codes, corporate policy, and rewards and punishment as factors for either ethical or unethical behavior. Pelletier and Bly, 2006. Roraff, 2010. The ability to have power and free will makes ethics possible and allows philosophers to disagree among themselves on the theories they present. Hartman, 2008. Researchers have not yet reached agreement. Mathieson, 2007, regarding ethical theories. Roraff, 2010. As a result of the dilemma, leaders neglected the mission, programs, services, and defined practices in their organizations. Although the importance of ethical conduct has gained wide acknowledgement in the human services, managers' identification and resolution of ethical issues still receive little attention. Some managers complained of being in an objectionable position to make decisions, which can affect multiple patients without any framework guiding these ventures. Foglia, 2009. The general allocation of resources is what I struggle with the most. I mean, how many nursing home beds are we to have versus how much homeless care are we going to do? Is it a worse dilemma for someone waiting for a primary care appointment versus an elective surgery? P30. The clinicians complained that they had a right to be a part of decision-making due to their special obligation to the patients, as well as their bedside knowledge of patient needs. If health administrators neglect this premise, according to the clinicians, it becomes an ethical problem. Foglia et al., 2009. When staff members are unable to act in accordance with their professional ethical stance and to deliver an appropriate standard of care, a dilemma occurs. Holm and Severinson, 2014. Dilemmas can still occur based on other circumstances, such as mental health, tumors, or hormonal imbalances. Such conditions, if re-evaluated, will undergo analysis based on context, especially with different patients with different ailments and body compositions. Torin, 2010. Managers often encounter ethical dilemmas in their organizations and suggested a decision-making model to help solve the problem. Torin, 2010. Current findings O'Neill, 2004, described the ethical dilemma of senior executives in healthcare organizations and indicated most conflicts that occur in healthcare have ethical implications. O'Neill further emphasized the general view of ethical decision-making as a team effort rather than an individual process, an indication that the organization in which executives thrive, but does not have a formal process of evaluating the factors and motives used in ethical decision-making and the outcomes of the decision, advocates for a recommendation of a conceptual ethical decision-making framework for decision-making use, and suggested further studies at the end of the chapter 2. Grunfeld, 2000, commented on the ongoing moral crisis in healthcare organizations and indicated that technology, commercialization, and fierce competition yield profitable dividends at the expense of patients' trust. Questions of prolonging life, ending life, propagating life, and re-engineering life test traditional approaches to moral reasoning. These challenges and dilemmas make it necessary to seek collaborative approaches to moral reasoning and rebuild trust in the industry. Ulrich, Hamrick, and Grady, 2010, noted the growing problem of ethical dilemmas in healthcare organizations is a result of the inability to communicate well, inadequate collaboration, and perceived powerlessness. Identifying mechanisms to support healthcare providers who have limited time to focus on ethical issues entails moral distress and tends to linger beyond the occurrence. An open dialogue should take place among patients, providers, and administrative personnel when ethical issues surface that providers feel they cannot handle. Two ways to decrease moral distress are interdisciplinary education and collegial practice. Physicians and nurses might benefit from an ethics course that helps individuals learn from others by exchanging ideas regarding each other's profession and ethical policies and philosophies. Students should receive encouragement to develop an ethical skill set to create the confidence needed to express their convictions when moral issues arise in patient care, such as the initiation of do not resuscitate discussions. Developing a shared sense of responsibility between coworkers regarding their shared practice models may remove moral distress and improve professional satisfaction. With a shortage of nurses and physicians in the United States, the focus should be on interdisciplinary education and collegial practices due to the need to commit to mutual ground, to garner mutual respect, and to discuss expressive ways to communicate any ethical problems identified by the group. Roy, 2010, described the reasons for the ethical dilemmas that occur in healthcare as being rampant, according to the practice of the managers. Thus, observing certain rules or ordinances minimized the situation. An example of resolutions used to solve healthcare ethical dilemmas is value orientation and observing certain ethical standards such as discretionary standards. Chapter 6. Bioethical Standards for Resolving Ethical Dilemmas. Bioethics is the application of ethics to the field of medicine and healthcare. The Center for Practical Bioethics notes that bioethics is multidisciplinary as it combines philosophy, theology, history, and law with medicine, nursing, health policy, and the medical humanities. Insights from various disciplines are brought to bear on the complex interaction of human life, science, and technology. Healthcare organizations are vast and require a theoretical framework or model to implement ethical decision-making. Ethical decisions in healthcare are those decisions that profoundly affect the lives of people. Brown, 2010. Disputes arise among organizational management, especially regarding cultural values, and the suggested solution to such conflicts is a common or universal rule on decision-making. Littleton et al., 2010, quoted Beauchamp and Childress as stating that many institutions have used ethics review boards and committee decision-making models and frameworks as a guide for ethical decision-making settings. However, as Brown, 2010, has aptly noted, in order for healthcare administrators to deal with the daily ethical decisions they have to make, they need a decision-making process that allows them to address ethical dilemmas within a rational, justifiable ethical framework. Generally, healthcare professionals often addresses ethical dilemmas using the principles of autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. Individuals in the United States, for instance, have the right to fair treatment and access to healthcare without unnecessary wait times. Respect for human dignity is seen as humane treatment. Maintaining high-quality patient care is a concern when organizations have limited resources available to meet such a goal. Politicization and the process of resource management are significant problems, but the system supports physicians, employees, and gatekeepers working together, with physicians using available resources. However, beyond the aforementioned principles and for healthcare administrators, in particular, the bioethical theory of symphonology, Husted and Husted, 1995, has been proven to provide such a highly effectual framework. Symphonology is a belief that an agreement exists between all rational parties involved. Brown, 2010. This agreement is implicit in nature, and simply put, it is the agreement not to aggress. In other words, I will not act against you, and you will not act against me. Brown, 2010. Consequently, symphonology helps to unravel ethical dilemmas by providing healthcare professionals with an uncomplicated framework for ethical decision-making. We shall be dwelling fully on the principles of symphonology in the next chapter. However, it must be emphasized here that while symphonology helps to alleviate any ethical dilemmas by providing healthcare administrators with a foundation for making ethical decisions, the framework is fundamentally dependent upon the bioethical standards of fidelity, beneficence, objectivity, self-assertiveness, freedom, and autonomy. According to Husted and Husted, 2001, an agreement can only be analyzed by reference to these bioethical standards. They maintain that the bioethical standards are in conflict with the forming of an irrational agreement. Given the volitional and rational nature of the parties to the agreement, the bioethical standards are, as will become obvious, intricately bound up with it. To a large extent, they will determine its outcome. Overview of bioethical standards. 1. Fidelity. Fidelity is the keeping of promises. For healthcare administrators, this means remaining true to the professional promises made to provide quality, competent care to patients. Both administrators and those they manage owe the other loyalty. Although the greater burden is on the healthcare provider, increasingly the patient must assume some of the responsibility. Beauchamp and Childress, 2001. Brown, 2010, sees fidelity as faithfulness or commitment to the agreement. It is the agreement to adhere to the terms of the agreement. It is persistence in seeking to gain benefit or to avoid harm. According to Dayton, 2018, in healthcare, fidelity is the most important of the ethical principles because it governs the other 6. Administrators promise to provide competent care to patients and to do so in a way that is honest, responsible, and fair. Naturally, fidelity is considered by many healthcare administrators to be the most common source of ethical conflict. Healthcare professionals may find themselves caught between what they believe is right what the patient wants, what other members of the healthcare team expect, and what is required by organizational policy and the law. 2. Beneficence. Beneficence means to do good, or at least do no harm. Brown, 2010. The purpose of any agreement is to attain benefit, and no one would enter into an agreement that is not beneficial. McCormick, 2018, explains in detail that the ordinary meaning of this principle is that healthcare providers and administrators have a duty to be of a benefit to the patient, as well as to take positive steps to prevent and to remove harm from the patient. These duties are viewed as rational and self-evident and are widely accepted as the proper goals of medicine. This principle is at the very heart of healthcare, implying that a suffering supplicant, the patient, can enter into a relationship with one whom society has licensed as competent to provide medical care, trusting that the physician's chief objective is to help. The goal of providing benefit can be applied both to individual patients and to the good of society as a whole. For example, the good health of a particular patient is an appropriate goal of medicine, and the prevention of disease through research and the employment of vaccines is the same goal expanded to the population at large. 3. Self-assertion. Self-assertion or privacy is a person's power to control his own time and effort. If we could not control our own time and effort, then we would not be able to form and carry through agreements. Brown, 2010. Kachane, 2008, further states that the right to control one's time and effort is important to any person. Thus, the healthcare administrator should remind the patient of his or her right to self-assertiveness and independence. This means that a patient should be empowered to make a stand, even against the traditions of his or her own faith tradition, if that holds him or her captive and stalls their progress. 4. Objectivity. Brown, 2010, asserts that objectivity is the reality of the situation. It is a person's capacity to be aware of things as they are and to be able to act on this awareness. In order to exercise our rationality, we need to know the reality of the situation. A rational decision is not possible without objective knowledge of the situation. Husted and Husted, 2001, see objectivity from two perspectives. As an intellectual capacity, objectivity is a person's ability to be aware of things as they are in themselves apart from his awareness and evaluations. As a physical capacity, objectivity is a person's ability to act on this awareness. As a bioethical standard, objectivity is a nurse's or patient's ability to achieve and sustain the exercise of his objective awareness. In relation to the standard of autonomy, it is a patient's right to be supported in the act of exercising and acting on objective awareness. 5. Freedom. Freedom is the right and power of the person to make voluntary choices. It is the right to function as an independent being and to initiate actions without interference. According to Husted and Husted, 2001, freedom as a bioethical standard is self-directedness, an agent's capacity and consequent right to take long-term actions based on the agent's own values and motivations. The standard of freedom involves an extended sequence of events, especially a sequence extended over a lifetime. One can possess freedom without making a long-term agreement, but one cannot make a long-term agreement without possessing freedom. Brown, 2010, sees freedom as self-determination. It is a person's capacity to take independent action based on his evaluation of his situation. Freedom is understanding what we can and cannot do. We do not have unrestricted freedom. It is limited by the freedom of others. 6. Autonomy. Autonomy, as a bioethical standard, refers to the uniqueness of an individual person. This uniqueness is the specific nature, the interwoven character structures of that person. Husted and Husted, 2001. According to the British Medical Association, 2020, a respect for patient autonomy is probably the single most talked about principle or concept in medical ethics. A respect for competent decisions by adult patients is also a cornerstone of healthcare administration. BMA further explains that two conditions are ordinarily required before a decision can be regarded as autonomous. The individual has to have the relevant internal capacities for self-government and has to be free from external constraints. In a medical context, a decision is ordinarily regarded as autonomous, where the individual has the capacity to make the relevant decision, has sufficient information to make the decision and does so voluntarily. Simply put then, autonomy is the principle that states people should be educated and able to make decisions regarding what happens to them without being influenced. Autonomy is Latin for self-rule. This simply means that all aspects of the decision should be presented to someone to allow them to make an educated decision. The information presented should be as factual as possible, without bias or personal options being asserted. Brown, 2010, opines that autonomy is made up of the essential character structures of an individual person. It is uniqueness, those qualities that make someone the unique person that he is. A. Train, 2020, also adds that respect for autonomy requires that patients be told the truth about their condition and informed about the risk and benefits of treatment. Under the law, they are permitted to refuse treatment, even if the best and most reliable information indicates that treatment would be beneficial, unless their action may have a negative impact on the well-being of another individual. Number 7. Conscious application. Bioethics refers to ethics pertaining to life and how life is altered. Barron, 2016. Healthcare leaders can learn these 6 bioethical standards and can retrieve them as innate intuitive thoughts when the need arises. Learning these standards could be useful in most decision-making processes. Healthcare administrators might use the 6 bioethical standards or tools depending on the context of the decision and can be attributed to the psychologist's use of their knowledge on human behavior on assessment of clients. Hyde, 2012, mentioned there were no systematic or evidence-based procedures for resolving challenges that often threaten the goals of human service agencies. According to Foglia et al., 2009, ethical challenges is the best understood and best developed decision-making process that mirrors the central commitments of organizational justice. Therefore, a need exists for more careful training in the area of ethical problem-solving that maintains the vision of human services. Patients' rights need protecting in the bid to manage healthcare, which is easily lost in track or neglected, especially where there is no tool to apply before making decisions in the healthcare system. In healthcare, individuals often address ethical dilemmas using the principles of autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. According to Holm and Severinson, 2014, ethical dilemmas relate to making the right decisions in different situations and with justifying these decisions. Although all members of a team in an organization are capable of good judgment and choices, the cultural norms of such organizations may influence them and put them at risk. For example, the lack of research on ethical dilemmas experienced by healthcare providers who care for depressed older persons becomes eminent. The understanding of the responsibility in a team setting comprises of balancing autonomy, care, and dignity, and differences in the understanding of responsibility, lack of engagement, and trust between the various professional categories. Lack of commitment often occurs when negative attitudes about aging and older people's inability to be in charge of their life lead to poor health, which can indicate a lack of self-management. One of the ways to support professionals who handle ethical dilemmas is education and training. Svensson, 2014. Perspectives on ethical challenges vary depending on the respondent's role. Understanding these differences can help leaders take practical steps to address these challenges. Chapter 7, Symphonology Theory, Ideal Framework for Ethical Decision-Making. As noted in the previous chapter, the 6 bioethical standards are key components of the symphonological theory and are structurally and functionally interrelated. By implication, these standards are a precondition for ethical decision-making by healthcare administrators. All of these standards exist together and are intertwined with the nature of the individual and the context within which the individual exists. Therefore, when all of these aspects of the individual and application of the bioethical standards are in harmony with each other and with the context of an action, that action is ethically justifiable. Irwin, 2004, notes that the interplay of all of these concepts is similar to the interplay of musical instruments in the performance of a symphony composition. In symphonology, this relationship among the bioethical standards is necessary because of the assumed nature of man and their relevance to the agreement between the nurse and the patient. Husted and Husted, 2001, defines symphonology as the study of agreements in the healthcare arena between healthcare professionals and patients. It is a study of the ethical implications of the healthcare professional-patient agreement. They further explain it as a practice-based ethic appropriate to people practicing as professionals. It is a set of standards of behavior, preconditions necessary to agreement and professional interaction, requiring contextual understanding and application for ideal interactions in the healthcare setting. With reference to the previously discussed bioethical standards, Husted and Husted, 1995-2001, assert that all of these aspects of the symphonological theory must be taken together in order for the process of decision-making to be sufficient in achieving an ethically justifiable decision. Taken together, the standards form the theory construct of a bioethical decision-making model. According to Brown, 2010, a symphonological approach involves establishing an agreement regarding the nature of the relationship between two parties involved, thus improving the process needed and reducing dilemmas. Agreement in symphonology is a shared state of awareness on the basis of which interaction occurs. Husted and Husted, 2008. The agreement is not formed through a written contract or consent. It is formed through the understanding of the relationship. When a health administrator walks into the patient's room to identify and introduce herself, the relationship has been established, an agreement has been set. The agreement is perpetuated through expectations and commitments. These expectations and commitments will establish the success of the ethical interaction or relationship. Husted and Husted, 2008. The symphonological process only exists through agreement. Each participant ought to behave through the existence of that agreement. Moreover, symphonological theory involves delivering knowledge about agreements with the context of the situation to guide ethical decision-making. Brown, 2010, noted, "The context of the situation is the objective reality of the situation as it exists at the time and place in which the decision must be made, and includes the capabilities of those who are relevantly involved." According to symphonology, the context of a situation does not use alone concepts such as duty or the greatest good for the greatest number. Brown, 2010, para 3. Symphonology is not about the use of rules, cultural standards, personal beliefs, and emotions in making decisions. Rather, symphonology uses the situation as it exists and bioethical standards to reach justifiable, rational, and ethical decisions. Brown, 2010. The symphonological bioethical framework showing the 6 bioethical standards. From a Bioethical Decision-Making Guide, a synopsis of symphonology, as cited by Brown, 2010. Retrieved from http://www.personal.psu.edu/n4458 symphonology.rt by ILoghalu, S. reprinted. The value of symphonology theory is that healthcare managers can use it to apply the same strategic approach to ethical dilemmas as philosophers used in moral reasoning. Breen et al., 2010. Ovid's acceptance of abortion and Socrates' willingness to accept execution rather than keep his moral agreements are examples of challenges to individuals' ethics. A key assumption of the symphonological theory is that ethical decision-making and ethical action are context-dependent. Ethical action cannot be separated from the context in which it occurs. Context is seen as the interweaving of purpose, knowledge, and the facts of the situation. In ethical decision-making, the context includes the reality of the situation and the relevant knowledge that decision-makers bring to that situation. It is pointed out that the forming of a context requires that an agent become aware of his situation. Husted and Husted, 1995, p. 99. This definition suggests relationships among knowledge, objectivity, purpose, and reason that are symmetrical and mutually necessary. Knowledge and the facts of the situation are also interrelated with the bioethical standards in the individual's experience of a given context for action. Taken together, these concepts are sufficient to form the basis of an ethically justifiable decision or action. Knowledge of the above agreements guides the decision-making process and yields the symphonological framework. Brown, 2010. Hospers, 1972, explained, "In ethics, everything is contextual." p. 63. According to Brown, 2010, The context of the situation is the objective reality of the situation as it exists at the time and place in which the decision must be made, which includes the capabilities of those who are relevantly involved. Para 3. Concluding inferences. This author believes healthcare leaders' decision-making is prone to ethical dilemmas, but changes in organizational systems and processes might minimize this problem. People who grow up in the same environment share the same experiences, and people from the same country and same cultural area often share similarities. An understanding of this ethical phenomenon could help healthcare leaders and policymakers determine the best ways to reconcile business and clinical operations. Leaders in healthcare organizations might need thorough training to provide effective leadership. All levels of leadership should initiate training to gain knowledge of bioethical standards. Individuals' moral values need re-evaluation prior to their acceptance into leadership positions. Using the normative framework might assist healthcare management or serve as a guide for healthcare administrators in their decision-making process. Establishing such a framework could benefit the general quality of life in the healthcare system as well as the world. The field of healthcare is virtually devoid of any model to examine administrators' ethical decision-making in business operations and patient care regarding a relationship to a professional code of ethics. Language is an important aspect of life. Without proper attention, language is misunderstood when discussing experiences, especially in research. Knowing things in variable ways using one's senses is vital, although empirical knowing is useful too, but not more significant. The primary sources of information in the world are the senses, but perception is always selective and thus shapes each event into a unique understanding of the moment. Harvey, 1997. Views about the world converge in a particular way. Experiences of reality differ among individuals. Individual points of view about a phenomenon can be different and makes each person unique. Ethical dilemmas arise in situations where somebody must choose one of two or more unsatisfactory alternatives. No person should have any moral authority over another. Ethical dilemmas often pose a problem in group settings. Every individual is unique and should be able to practice moral behaviors that are beneficial for such growth. Organizational leaders need not impose moral or religious practices on workers, except to ensure organization growth. Butts, 2016.